I'm Alan Webster. I'll just introduce myself a bit. I'm only 19 and I've only been coding in C for about I guess I've only been coding in C for less than a year because I started basically when Handmade Hero started. That's when I gave it a shot, and this is the first big thing I've done in C. Before that, I mostly coded in C++, which I did for about 6 years, and that included all sorts of like messing with templates. I spent a long time playing with templates and inheritance and all that stuff that exists in C++. And I did some stuff, but um, yeah, I never really did anything that I would say is noteworthy. Besides, I made a game that was fairly simple and probably, looking at it now, is far simpler than what I did. So I'm not really here to talk C versus C++, that kind of stuff, because lots of people have been discussing that already. But to throw my 2 cents in on that, I definitely have found myself more productive since I made that switch. More about the editor though. I started the editor because I was watching Handmade Hero, um, and uh, it it became clear to me that um, that Casey was, writing code a lot. That he was doing things that he would make like 10 changes that were all the exact same change. You know, like something. The simplest thing that I can think of most recently was when he was doing the change to the four wide intrinsics. Um, and that just involved like finding pluses and swapping them out with an add intrinsic in certain places, but that's not really a trivial text transformation because that you're taking out a plus and then putting a comma and a parenthesis on both sides and then an intrinsic at the beginning. But from the point of view of the abstract syntax tree, that's a very simple change. So like it occurred to me that there's certain ways you can look at code, and text isn't the only way code is shaped. It's also shaped by an abstract syntax tree, the tokens, and there's even higher level things past the abstract syntax tree that you could look at too, like a dependency graph and stuff. And certain things you want to do, you want to edit the code at different levels. So I wanted to explore in that direction. But since I got started, I haven't really gotten past what normal text editors already are doing, and I still want to get to that. But I've been also another goal is to just handle the basics really well. And by that what I mean that I'm going to show off specifically here, now that it's 7 and it's starting time, is that the editor's been the thing I've been working on most recently is getting the 10 megabyte file, as I've been calling it, to work, because it'd just be nice to know that when you open your editor, it's going to run fast, even though it's a slightly hard problem. Um, and it's not even didn't turn out to even be that bad to make 10 megabytes work. So I'm going to show off some of that working, and since I have never showed off really anything but smooth scrolling, I'm going to show off a few other littler things that are also there, just to get it out there. This is a super informal demo, so if you have questions or comments or anything along the way, feel free to interrupt me. I'll be watching the chat. um, so yeah, well, first thing I want to do is I'm going to pop open this directory, and I want to look at this file under test large. So you see I've got a file, I say 10 megabytes, but that's because the chunk I was copying and pasting was a little less than 1 megabyte, it was a little less than 1 megabyte, and after 10 pastes, it got close to 10 megabytes. So this is how big it really is. But what I want to do is I want to open this in Visual Studio, and I have no idea what's going to happen. Like this happens if you're not even opening any files. So this first screen doesn't count. Okay. Yeah, now here's it's opening the file. Okay. So that wasn't as bad as you might expect it to be. Let's see, it handles all right. me see if I try find. It's going to take a while to open that. I'm going to look for deep in file. Okay, it did that okay. So it's doing everything sort of alright, and you can see we're pretty deep into the file, but it's also just a little bit sluggish at this point. Like when I scroll, it's really not great. That, you know, didn't feel great right there. So it works, but I feel like it's just at some point not working as fast as it should. Yes, this, you know, inserting characters is working fine, but I just wanted to, as an experience, see what happened when I opened it. Now, I'm happy that I did that because one thing I know for sure is true is that the loading time is faster. But, you know, I'll be a little conservative on how much I get from that, because I know Visual Studio is also trying to do like IntelliSense and harder stuff, which, you know, maybe that takes more time to figure out. But nonetheless, let's take a look at what happens on the 4coder when we try the 10 megabyte file. So since we're looking at the 4coder right now, a couple things. First of all, the 4coder it was inspired by Handmade Hero. So it was originally, I was just hand making everything, and it's still a software renderer. And at some point I'm going to change that, because we've seen on Handmade Hero that you could optimize software renderer to be super fast, but I'd rather just go, I'd rather just skip that and go to the GPU, I think, than try to make SSE work. I don't know, maybe that's not the right idea, but it seems like the reasonable thing to do. I know them both equally well. So I can't really go full screen with this because the rendering at 920 by 1080 is a little less, it's like just a little too slow for the frame rate. But I can, at this size, open this file, and you can see right there, it happened so fast you might not have seen it, so I'm going to do it again. It opens the file right away. This is the same 10 megabyte file. I'm going to hit enter now. So that's how fast we get the file and then the tokens. So that you can see that was faster than Visual Studio by a long shot, and it was even optimized to the point where it got the file to you right away, so that if the tokens were going to take a while, which they weren't, but if they were, that's parallel now. So so I think that was like something I've always just wondered about. Why do I wait for Visual Studio to load the extra data, like tokens slash you know, whatever they do for IntelliSense, which I guess is probably an abstract syntax tree and a full parsing and stuff. Why do I wait for that? And it gets worse when it's not one file. When you're looking at a project, like I used to just do all my editing in Visual Studio, and you open a file. Well, if it's going to open other files, that's going to involve like chasing through its headers and also checking it against the other things that exist probably to see. I don't know. It just starts getting really slow in certain circumstances, and so I thought it would just be nice to have something that just works at a decent high speed no matter what. It's just a sort of standard that I've been trying to chase down with this. Now, the other thing, of course, to see is how the editing goes. So here we are, again, 140,000 lines into the file, and we can now move around, scrolling, and everything is fine. And we can insert stuff. And this is all, you know, just going to work. Now you do have to excuse the auto tab is not great. It sort of works, but something about this file it doesn't like. There must be an extra parenthesis somewhere or something. So it's actually surprising that it works fast, because it's also really lazy. It doesn't just check the nearby area like it should. But I was just cheesing that when I put it in. But you can see like it colored struct right away. It will notice things like, you know, floating point numbers. Oops, got that. The hardest part, I'll get to that, was that the strings didn't quite work out as easily, because everything else, when you edit the file, when you edit it, when you add text or delete text for that matter, you really just sort of look at the range where you made the edit, right? So if I copy this and I paste it, all it takes to figure out how to fix the tokens is to like look back at one full token and then parse forward until you find that your tokens are lining up to the old tokens, and then you're done parsing, right? That's all you have to do. But that's not true in one case, because there's a certain case where you never start matching up with the old tokens, and that's when you do this, right? Now that's also extremely fast. That just reparsed too, because all the whole file just became a string, and it's actually fast enough to do that without, that's not a hard problem. That's seeking through. The hard part is based on how many tokens there are, not on how long the file is. So when I do that, there's very few tokens, and it's actually very fast. But the hard part was when you did this, right? And you can see it took it a moment, and then it relexed everything. Now, I compared that to Visual Studio earlier, so I want to see, again, I haven't tried this. I have no idea if Visual Studio handles this smartly or not, or how they handle it. I've looked at how Emacs does it, and theirs is a little bit smarter than mine still, which means I'm not done messing with it. But I'm curious to see what happens when I try it here. Oh, great, right. So that's okay. You see what they did there? When I add that quote, they're trying to avoid that problem by adding a new quote. I've always wondered why they did that. Actually, I'm betting that is the whole advantage right there of that system. Yeah, they're just handling this a totally different way. They're avoiding ever having to do the full relax. I guess that's the way to do it. I guess that works. I guess. Hey guys, hey Garlando, yeah, I could reparse my face. I haven't really researched the algorithms. Unfortunately, everything I did know I have to learn on Wikipedia. So if they've got a good article on Wikipedia, I can do that. But it's kind of hard to know that even though I know what I'm doing when I'm reading Wikipedia, it's still pretty hard to parse their face, I suppose you could say. It's going pretty good. Thanks for coming by. So, yeah, that's basically it. It's actually not that much to show off. The point is that it works. Yeah, I'm not totally sure about that. Someone pointed that out to me recently, so I actually have to reconsider whether or not this is even a problem. I won't. I'll stop. But I'll stop responding to dumb comments, that is. But I guess, yeah, I guess that might be the better solution. And I know Emacs does something similar, but I was actually basing all of this on Emacs, basically. So I'll pull Emacs up real quick to show you what I'm talking about, because I mean, it didn't even occur to me until this morning that I should. It didn't occur to me until this morning that I should even compare to Visual Studio during the demo. Like I said, I would do a demo, and then I thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting? Because I haven't made that comparison. But if you pull open, well, let's pull open the same. Whoops, what am I doing? Data test large. Pull open the same thing on Emacs. It takes it a second to open. It's a little faster than Visual Studio, also slower than 4coder. And then I can seek through this file for the deep in. Well, that's taken it a while. Yeah, so we've got that beat, the seeking. And when you edit the file here, right, it takes a second and then does that. So it's kind of similar to mine, except I don't know. Well, what it technically is doing, I know what it's doing because I looked into it, is if I do that, you can see it reparsed the first two lines right away, and then it gave up and decided to do it parallel, I think. And it always does that when it does a thing sort of like my relax. The difference is my relax is based on how many tokens it has consumed or produced, not how many lines. So that's why it's able to just do that right away. But the bigger point is I based the behavior on Emacs, because I was just comparing everything I did to Emacs. And I don't know if it's necessarily correct, but the point is now it can do this relaxing parallelly if it needs to. But yeah, that's really all there is to the 10 megabyte file. It just works, which, you know, it's funny that I even think of it as a feature because it's not that impressive when you see it working, but when you put it to the background of everyone else where it doesn't work, you might even be able to claim that it's a feature that your program even works. Um, well, anyway, I'll stop. I'll stop trashing on everyone else, and I'll go back to some other features. So that's the 10 megabyte file. It can do a few other cool things. So I'm gonna pop open the basic file that I use. I'm gonna minimize Emacs since I have the same color scheme on both. Let's see, what are some other cool things it can do? You've already seen it doing find, which I based on the incremental search temporarily. It can do multi-panels. So let's, can't do multi-panels. Good to know. I have to debug that. So I won't open a panel and show you anything else the panels can do apparently. But what I will do is I will show you some of the other features, since that's basically all there is to multi-panels. You've probably seen, well, if you haven't, there's smooth scrolling, which is nice. If you're not sure why smooth scrolling is nice, I'll give you a quick explanation on that. So when you say you move your cursor just down a little bit, right? The problem you can have, let me pull up Emacs and show you what it looks like there, right, is I did that, and as soon as it moves, at least for me, if it moves far, I sort of have lost my spot in the code. It's especially bad when I hit page up and page down, which I try to avoid doing at all in Emacs because it's just like, oh, is it slow? The smooth scrolling? Yeah, it runs fine. Yeah, well, I've only just finished this, and there's actually, I am doing the demo knowing that there is one horrible bug in the relexer that could trigger any time, and that there's another bug that disappeared because I think I fixed it, but I never got to figure out what it was before I accidentally fixed it because I was fixing a different bug. So yeah, it's a little bit scary, but I was excited enough that I just went ahead with the demo. The smoothness, unfortunately, yeah, it looks great in person, and I'm gonna make like a high-speed video of it. The first video I made, there were a ton of problems. Like I hadn't actually had subpixel positions, so if you pay close attention, you can see it do the terrible pixel by pixel steps right at the end. But it's fast enough that you had to be here, I guess, probably to even notice that. And there's a problem at the bottom of the file, so I always sort of jump the gun and say something works before it does. So it's probably a bad habit. But anyway, I'm going to go back to looking at features. It does handle right now multiple line modes. So I'm going to look at some of those. First of all, you can go into wrapped mode. So you can see this line here that goes over the end. When I go into wrapped mode, it comes down there. So I don't know, some people like that. I don't really like wrapped mode, but some people seem to use it. So I put that in. It's kind of a difficult thing to keep working. But I've also noticed, I wonder if I can make this happen. There's this hilarious bug, it's in Emacs, that I discovered when I started working on this. So if I find a line where I can scroll over a little bit, right, and then if I start moving up and down enough, might not happen for me while I'm trying to download it, but sometimes Emacs will get really confused about which what X position it's at when you're scrolled over, and yeah, I can't necessarily make it happen on command, but it definitely happens sometimes. You'll be right here and you press it down. Oh, did you see that? I pressed down and it moved to the left one, and I know what causes that because I had the bug. Unless it's a different reason, right? It could totally be a different reason, I guess. But there's just these little moments where it's doing it there too. It just doesn't quite understand the X position as well as it should. and this is on non-line wraps, and line wraps have its own problems. Um, let's see. Oh, it's got that's line wraps, and then you can do. So this is showing all of the slash r's. It looks like when I was optimizing the render, I might have messed up the background rectangle. There's a bunch of these little features that I don't look at very often. Like this shows you where your slash r's are, so if you wanted to see them, and then you can pop into this mode, which uses slash r slash n. Okay, sure. All right, so the forcoder is well, I'll tell the story from the beginning. The forcoder began in response to I was watching Handmade Hero, and after a few weeks, just a few weeks in, I had seen Casey almost every day, to at least a small extent, do something that the coding style made perfect sense, and I thought to myself, I should like start trying to learn how to code this way because it looks like a great way to code. But it also became clear that there were a bunch of little funny things that he was doing all the time. Like I can't remember any examples because there's just too many of them. But like one really cool one is recently when he was doing the intrinsics on the SIMD optimizations. Um, the the transformation was just a matter of like taking the pluses and replacing them with, you know, an add intrinsic and a few other things. So it's not all of them. Some of the translation was harder, but he spent at least a whole day, which was an hour, rewriting things that were literally just translations. And it occurred to me like that it was kind of like time consuming to do because of I think he probably macroed it in some clever way that worked, but it's a little bit time consuming to do because you have like two sections of text and a plus in the middle, and you're turning that into two sections of text with a comma in the middle, parenthesis on both sides, and an intrinsic at the front. So um, the the um, the text transformation is kind of complicated, but the from an abstract syntax tree point of view, it would be really easy to do that because you're just switching a plus with an intrinsic. And the text is a lot different, but the abstract syntax tree is the same thing with one change. And so the idea here is to have a code editor that allows you to edit code at various levels of how code is shaped, I guess is the best way to say it. So the text level is one way, and the abstract syntax tree is one. I might even try to get into like trying to make a dependency graph and see if you can get any cool things out of that. So it's all sort of experimental, but I just wanted to see, and I think Casey probably even suggested this at some point, that code editors could focus on the fact that they're editing code instead of text. But so far I've just been trying to get the text part even to be as good as I could possibly make it. Well, not as good, but because I don't want it to primarily be text, but good enough, you know, for editing code at least. I definitely gonna port it everywhere. One thing I've noticed is, or that I picked up, is that the reason Casey and Jonathan and anyone who uses Emacs uses it is because it works pretty much the same way everywhere that they go. That's what they always say, and I've found it to be somewhat true as well. And in general, that's just a useful thing to have. Is if you have to write code on a platform, it'd be really great if your coding environment was exactly the same. So yeah, it's super important to me. That's one of the big things I want to do is make sure that it works on any platform that people are going to write code on. It's almost like a requirement. In fact, I have a bullet point list that I should have written down because I wanted to recite it, but it's like in my head I've been thinking about it and editing it, of the bullets of like what are the main objectives, and you know those include things like I think it has to be portable. So that's how it segues off of your question. Um, uh, it's got to be it's got to know that it's editing code instead of text. Obviously, that's what I was just talking about earlier. But it's got to perform reasonably. Um, it's got to perform reasonably even when, like, for anything that is within like even beyond reasonable. If it's possible for it to perform well at 10 megabytes, for example, it ought to. And I'll probably end up upping that to 100. I think I want to have a 100 megabyte file being my real target. Um, but I'm gonna finish debugging and make sure everything's solid here, because if that's more going to be more optimization, then I'm not going to step up to that yet. But yeah, so robustness, I want it to be fast. I want it to be portable. I want it to be feature rich. The things that it's not going to do is um, it's not going to probably support a ton of extendability. Like it's going to be customizable. So that's I have a few ideas on how you would go about making it really easy to customize and then to move your customizations around. So one thing that Emacs does is you've got your extension language that you write your plugins for and your stuff like that. But then you have to do like if I'm on another platform, I have to move my Emacs file there and make sure I have it in the right spot or something so that it'll pick it up. Or I can't even remember. You have to like make sure that it launches with that configuration file. And so I have this idea for maybe saying if you've written your configuration file, then there can just be a button that says like make a new install. So the program can make an install for itself, and that install will package your configuration with it. So you can just say, I want to reinstall with this configuration, give me that installer, and then you'll just put that installer on the other thing and you've got your same exact program back. So that's an idea I've got that I'm going to work on at some point. And some other things that'll be easier to customize. I don't know if I don't really, there might be an extension language someday, but I think I'd rather it be simpler for how you customize. So that's one thing that I'm not really doing. So I, um, yeah, so let's see, what have we got here? Obner, yeah, if that's the fact that it exists ever sort of means that something has to be able to handle it. Um, right, so if you're saying some rarely use a 50 megabyte file, well, if someone has to open a 50 megabyte file, there has to be a way to open it. So it's like if it exists, I kind of want to handle it, right? Especially if it's a code file. Now, you didn't specify that, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's what you meant. As far as multi-cursors, I've seen that stuff happen. I'm still wondering about it. I mean, it's definitely an advanced text editing thing, but usually the reason you have stuff like that is because what you wanted to do was edit a lot of stuff at once. But the reason there's easier ways to do that when you know that you're editing code of a specific language. So one example of something that I think would be really great, I'll show you around in the code a little bit to give you an example of the kind of thing that I think could exist. One of the sorts of things that should just be possible, or that could be possible, it would be possible if you knew you were editing a specific language of code, and you wouldn't really need multiple cursors or anything like that. Those would look silly in comparison to editing this way. Where is it? It's yeah, if I go to the parser file, and we go to let's go to cpp lex file. So yeah, you guys get to see a little bit of the code, and if you have any questions about that, you can ask. But what I wanted to point out was I have this function called cpp lex step, right? And it takes in a cpp file and this parameter called lex, which is this struct called lex data, and it returns a result, and then I use that result to extend the stack of tokens. And then there's like slightly more complicated versions of this. There's this one up here, which is a lex file count, token file count. So it does the exact same thing, but instead of like making the stack as it goes, instead of having the growing array, it's just counting how many tokens it would have added. And it's a little bit complicated because sometimes it merges tokens. Like if you have 2 comments, it says that should just be 1 token, because that's better for certain reasons, and mostly because it's smaller and the tokens are kind of expensive, I guess. Yeah, I'll skip that. At least in my style, I basically always do line comments. So like, like this is a lot cheaper if it's all 1 comment token, which it is in my parser. And the other funny thing about an editor parser is you don't like throw away this stuff. You actually say, here's a token that's a comment because it still exists and you have to know that it exists. It's not only for parsing, right? You have to do other things with your tokens. So it's a little bit of an interesting place to be. But anyway, what this version does is it also uses the same functions. It has the CPP lex step and attempt token merge. So the way those functions come about, there's also, I'll show the one more before I tell the story actually. Relex file, which is the most complicated, does the same thing again, lex step, and then somewhere in here it'll do a merge. Oh, you know, it does, it should be doing a merge somewhere. I may have just forgotten how this exactly works, but I think there should be a merge. Isn't it pushing these tokens somewhere? Step result. Oh, push token. Oh yeah, so the actual lexing, the full lex doesn't. You only have to check the merges when you're counting the tokens. When you're pushing the tokens, this push token function is handling the merging automatically. And then down here you have to handle merges between the two, like the part where you did the relex and the stuff that was old tokens. You have to try to merge those ends. But the point is, this is a fairly complicated one, but it too is just pushing tokens onto a stack and using this lex step. So the place where those functions came from is originally I just opened up a new main, and the new main file I made was just it started an int main, and I wrote a loop that literally just went through the file. I probably ended up having a few functions as I went, but it started off with no functions, and I was just writing in main the thing that would get done what I wanted. And then I started pulling out like, oh, here's a function that like lexes one full string. Here's a function that lexes, a comment, line comment. Here's a function, blah blah blah, right? So as that went, eventually got to a point where I had code that looked like, how can I? Let me just pop over to data real quick, and I'll do. So it looks something like this, right? Int main. No, not like that. And it had a setup variable here, right? So maybe it was like, oh, position and lex state, and it might have been like, token count, and it had like a struct as well of token or something, which had some stuff in it, and then there was an array of those, right? So you had something kind of like this, and then I had a loop. I keep saying you, but really, yeah, I don't know why I'm saying that. It's very interesting which pronoun you use when we're talking about code, isn't it? I'm saying you because I'm imagining this is like a common thing that happens to everyone. So anyway, bye Garlando. So you have this loop, you have the setup variables, right? And then you have this loop, and inside there you might update those variables. So like position gets, plus by some amount, right, which you probably calculated during the step, and the tokens, you did a push token thing onto the tokens with the current token count, something like that, right? This is all made up as I go. It was nothing like this, but you have some stuff like this, and then complicated work is happening here, and then what I ended up doing to make those functions that were, the struct, which was called lex data, I think. CPP parser. Lex. Oops, where is it? Lex step result. So not that one. I want lex data. There it is. So this struct is what I ended up coming up with in actuality. So this thing here that I said, not the token struct. That would be up here actually, but these variables here, right, which aren't actually what we have here, but something like that, becomes this struct, right? So this is information that persists multiple times through the loop. Like you've declared them, and then you do some computation, you initialize them, and then you do some computation, and then they change maybe or not. And then the next step of the computation depends on what state they were in at the after the last step, right? So this happens all the time, and more complicated code just means you have more of these variables, usually outside of the loop. Well, at least more complicated code that looks like this. And then on the inside of the loop, you do some work, and then sometimes you also do some work down here, clean end work maybe. And so what the real transformation was, these variables become a struct, right? That becomes that struct. This work in here becomes a function that takes this struct as a pointer, and now you can do the work one step at a time. And then you can sort of massage the code from there to figure out the best way to actually set up that function so that you can do the different things you want to do with it. But the reason you want to be able to do that transformation easily is because I want to write the code like this, because then I can solve the problem right here in its own main file by itself. Like, I like to solve the problem the easy way and then start moving the code into the project. So then what I want to be able to do is I say, this, and it looks easy now, but normally it's not easy. It's easy, it's just time consuming to like go, here's my data struct, and then these go here, right? And that's not so bad. And then this becomes a function, and that function goes here. So you then have like data, and then you have, here's my function. I want to pull that out into a function. So it's like, my function step, right? And here's the part that kills me though, is I get this far along, and then you want your data pointer, and great. Now all of the local variables have to have this appended, right? So that's a lot of fun, is going through and making that work. And then from then on, and of course, like Jonathan Blow's language fixes that, because then all you do is you just go using data. All right, that's perfect. That's actually what you want. But since you don't have that, my idea before he introduced that was, just do a text transform. Well, not a code transformation. You say, hey, I've got this loop. I want to first say, let me back up now, that all of these local variables here, right, what should happen is I should be able to say, these local variables here, I'm going to highlight them somehow, like put a mark here and then put another mark here and say all these local variables, I want to pull them out into a struct. And it would generate this data struct, and you would specify a name, and it would put the variables into that struct, and then all of the other places where those variables were used locally would just be updated to have their date, so it would become like automatically this, and then all the places where those are used just get that appended, the data dot, right away. Right, and then later when you do the thing where this becomes a function that you pull out, the data dot becomes data arrow, right? It's actually fairly simple once you have the abstract syntax tree. Like, at least on paper, the hard part for me has been getting the abstract syntax tree. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff I'm gonna move towards working on soon. I'm just trying to make sure that, like, I want the functionality to be there before I add new features. So the fact that I heard about files over 1 megabyte meant I had to detour from this work and go back to getting the functionality. But I think that's all I've got to say in terms of what the 4coder is and what I'm aiming for. I realized that I spent just a while discussing it, and I haven't actually demoed as much as I wanted. So there's a couple more things I can do real quick. We know the panels don't work. Oh, right. This is something that I've always thought was odd, is that, so this is a file called basic.cpp. All right, I'm going to open that in Emacs right now. Let me kill this. Oops. Why are we... Oh, right, I was using the key commands for 4coder instead of for Emacs. Yes, kill that. I want to go to data test basic. So this is the same file, and Emacs handles this brilliantly. Not sarcasm there. If I were to edit this file and save it in 4coder, Emacs would give me a very hard time about that. So what I decided to do was to just make this as easy as possible to handle. I'm going to add that right there and be like, messed up the file sync, right? So now the files are not synced, and I'm going to save it. So I just saved basic.cpp, and right away, I didn't have these two open side by side. Right away, it just says, hey, there's a file sync problem. And that I don't know why I can't remember, but I feel like Emacs doesn't notify you when this happens. It just says um, that when you try to edit it, it's going to complain, right? That's what it does. So what happens is now I can edit the file, but it's just saying, hey, you're out of sync. The file on the system is different than the one you have open, just a warning. And I can edit if I want. I can also do Control-Shift open, which is O, and that'll just reload the file. Or it'll crash. That is also an option when you're demoing. It will crash. But before I did the relexing stuff, before I did parallel relexing, that was working. And it will be working this week when I finish debugging all this stuff. Is there any other stuff, little things that I've got at some point? Yeah, there's one thing else that I like. Yeah, I don't know what you do about crashes when you're demoing. I mean, they're already preventing me from showing one of the cooler problems that I have to deal with, but I guess that's okay. But one cool thing I did, I was trying to work on animations, and by that I mean, I was trying to work on like the smooth scrolling got me thinking about other things that, you know, help you to keep track of where you are in the code or what's going on. And I noticed that a lot of times I would like paste code, a large block of code, and I wasn't sure if it pasted because it looks exactly the same afterwards as it did before because you're in the same spot. Now with smooth scrolling, that's already fixed, but it still seemed like a nice idea maybe. So one thing I added is when you paste code, it starts yellow and it fades out. I don't know if it doesn't hurt, right? And sometimes it might help. I'm not sure, but let's see. Is there anything else that I thought was fun? I've got some other animation ideas, but I have to put those on hold since I found out the rendering is behind. Yes, I'm glad that the crashes. I've basically got I've got I can't remember if I've ever had a bug. Like I know obviously I've had bugs and I've got crashes, but they're almost always asserts. Like so that's been good. I've just added parallel, so um, I'm almost certain that there's a bunch of bugs in it right now because it's the first time I've written anything live. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably an assert. I could even look at it right now. That's the reopen file, or yeah, the reopen command, which might not be doing the parallel lex correctly for some reason. That's like that's probably what it is because it works fine until this weekend when I integrated parallel lexing. Let's see. Yeah, I don't really have any I don't really have anything else that I know of that. Oh man, I feel like it's weird because I've been working on this for a while now, but it's never been something that I've been able to work on 8 hours a day, so it doesn't have as much as I wish it had. One cool thing, and this is something I've always wanted to get someone's opinion on, but it has like a mark, kind of like Emacs does, but I draw it. It's this little gray box. So whenever you're like copying and pasting, I control space and it just moves that, and you can see it. I don't know if that's a good idea. So feedback on that would be cool. But that's all I've got. If anyone's got any questions or anything before I sign off, because I'm gonna hop over to Handmade Hero chat now. Yeah, you think so, Abner? I toyed with the idea of opening a Patreon, but I was not sure. Well, if you guys say so, I'll look into that next. That'll be my next side project. Yeah, okay. Well, that sounds like a good idea. I mean, it'd be awesome. Um, it would be awesome if I could set that up. One other thing. Do I want to mention this now? I don't know. I've got an idea for another stream I want to do. But I don't know when it'll be because I want to get this stuff working before I move on. But one thing I want to do in the future is to do an I am GUI stream because a lot of people are always asking about that in Handmade Hero, and it's clear that Casey doesn't want to add. Oh, okay. So was enabled says I should read questions before I answer them, and he's or she, I guess, is totally correct. I should have been doing that. I just never even thought of it. But there you go. I will do that from now on. Um, hey, thanks, Casey, for coming. That's cool. I'm not totally opposed to plugins. It would just, I really don't want it to be a scripting language. Like, if you were to look through my channel, you would see that one thing I did in C++ for a while was I played with like a Lua interpreter. Um, and that, like, I know how that works, and I could almost trivially add that in, but I just don't like to do that anymore. Like if I was going to write a plugin, I wouldn't use anything but C either. So, however I do plugins has to somehow be like DLL based. So, uh, yeah, I just don't really have any ideas on that yet. I mean, oh yeah, okay. Abner said, by the way, because I'm answering his question, how do you feel about plugins for your editor, or is it not, or is its own self-contained thing? I think plugins are nice at a certain point because, like, I don't want to have to write everything in the world that people want to do, but I also, I don't know. The hard thing is just how to put them in there because I don't want it to be a scripted thing necessarily, but I also don't want it to be a hassle. So that's something that it seems like a cool idea, but it's not like at the top of my to-do list at the moment. There's other things that I think are cooler. Yeah, Chrono Dragon says plugins are necessary for an editor to stay relevant over time. I'm guessing that's probably true. Um, but yeah, I think the thing is like, however I do plugins just has to make sense with the other stuff. So it's like something I want to add in later. Like I want to get the cool ideas like code transforms and editing abstract syntax trees and stuff. I want to get that in there first because that's stuff that people don't have at all from what I've seen. Like I've seen a few like if you're using Eclipse, you can rename a variable in local namespaces, which is cool, I guess. I mean, it's like the least important thing, but you sometimes need to do it. Better, there's a lot more you want to do in refactoring than that. Well, we're getting pretty close to Handmade Hero time, and it looks like the questions are slowing down. So I'm gonna cut it off in a minute or two, unless I see another question. All right, I think that was good. So thanks for coming out, guys. Everyone who made it. I'll try to keep everyone posted on how many lines of code, Abner asks. I can answer that. Let's see. Now, not all of this is live code. Some of this is the parser that I want to pull out. What's it doing? Why is it doing this? It's actually not the opening. What is it doing? Oh, that's right. So CLOC just had a lot of trouble with the lines of code problem. That's what that was on a 10 megabyte file. So yeah, 10,522. Fiery Drake asks if I have heard of Brett Victor and code presentation and immediate feedback. And no, I haven't, but I'm gonna Google that later. Um, Anyways, to finish what I was thinking about this line of code thing, there's about 2,000 lines in there of parser that I basically want to scrap. Because I was writing a parser and it was going fine, but I was trying to do it without context sensitivity because I thought I could be maybe cleverer than everyone else, more clever than everyone else, and find a way to do it where you just sort of guess when you need to, and it just maybe works out, and then you fix it if it doesn't work out later or something. It was just a bad idea. I didn't really understand parsing well enough. It's really the first parser I've written from the ground up that actually makes an abstract syntax tree. So I learned some stuff, and I'm going to scrap those, and there'll be a new parser. But yeah, that's how many lines of code exist in the project right now. Chrome Dragon asks if there's rebindable key shortcuts, and yes, definitely. That's like something I've put a lot of thought into is how to easily do that. I want it to be at least have a graphical way to do it because I don't really get the concept in Emacs of if your editor isn't set up the way you want, you edit the text to make it work the way you want because it's a chicken and egg problem. If I'm having trouble editing text because my bindings are wrong, I'm also going to have trouble editing a config file because my bindings are still wrong. So yeah, I'm going to do that, and it's not necessarily going to be at least exclusively through a config file. And yeah, that's a given. That has to happen though. Rebindable keyboard shortcuts. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. I'll post it on YouTube when I can, and I'm gonna sign off now.